screaming, hollering in pain, agony from my leg. But, did I die? Like, fuck you. Them other people died, da 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 da. Like, look, you know what the relative told me? Because I remembered some of it. You guys said that I said that those people shouldn't have been driving. That is not my words. Lord Jesus Christ is my witness. Sweet, I mean, I swear up under my Mimi, over and under my mom, and by the Virgin Mary and Lord Jesus Christ, that that was told to me by the relative I spoke to on the phone, trying to comfort me and let me know it wasn't my fault. Because I started to say to her at one point, I said, I'm really worried that you guys may think it's my fault. I said, I've been told it's not, but to be honest with you, I said, I don't know what to think. I said, I'm so upset. I said, I left work early. I said, normally I would have stayed longer. I would have completely missed your people. I said, I'm so sorry. I was like, I was driving straight and paying attention. I had both hands on the wheel. I said, like I was in the right hand lane, and I said, and I turned towards the left hand lane at the split second and hit the brake because I thought, well, I want to try to avoid them and at the very least, maybe just only strike or hit them in the rear end. I thought I would be doing better if I could, because I only had maybe a full second, a second and a half to think and react, and all I could think is to try not to hit them completely in the front. And because I knew we were hitting, like I knew that at the time they started to edge out, and as I was coming up, I could tell that that the timing was not right and off. I was like, we're going to completely match up, and we did. And I said, and I don't know if it's my fault. I don't know if I could have. I was like, maybe I could have just. I said maybe I should have just gotten all the way over into the far lane as quicker instead of just trying to swerve and turn. I said, like I was beating myself up, and they literally said my first name. They said, please. They said, listen to me. They said, certain people didn't want them driving, but other family thought, it's good for them, and if they want to, they can, and, you know, and they said, you know, to be honest, I think it amounted to they didn't want to have to be doing errands and stuff for them. They're like, I don't know really. I said, who knows? It doesn't matter now. They said, but the point is, she was very old and didn't have good eyesight. She said about the driver, and and they're like, they might not have, she may not have seen you or recognized you. Um, she said, regardless, though, she said they're in heaven and they're in heaven together. And she said, and it's not your fault. She said, it's really not their fault. She said, I mean, technically it kind of is, but it is, but it's just a tragedy, and she said that the Lord works in mysterious ways. She said, I think that this was God's time for them to come home. And she had told me, she's like, I'm sorry that God, had to use you. As she said, but we don't make these decisions or choose these things. She said, are you religious, hon? And I told her what I was raised and stuff. And she said, well, good deal. And she told me to get better and not to carry any of that weight on my shoulders. And and not to worry about anything from them, that they wouldn't, she said that, I speak for my family, nobody's coming after you or anything. We're not disagreeing with what Highway Patrol is saying, or, she, thanked me because she said that, you didn't try to refuse or object to anything being looked at on your side or anything. And she said you had nothing to hide. Uh, you know, a nurse from the school right in front of where the crash site was on the highway there was a vocational tech school there, and a nurse had came out of there, one of the people that called emergency responders like I did, and she came up and talked to me, as well as after the first people that got there was Highway Patrol, and Highway Patrol even came up to my car and talked to me. And all of that was written down was said that the subject was alert, oriented, and conscious and aware, you know, um, was oriented to date and time and place, all of that stuff. Um, Suffered a minor, blacking out, knockout, whatever, and but was conscious when, they arrived. And they did not observe any odors of alcohol, any odors of the only thing they observed a smell from was, and I was vaping when I had a vape. They said was nicotine vape juice, vapor. They didn't observe any smells. They inventoried and searched through my whole car. There was nothing at all. No blunt wraps, nothing like that, because I wasn't using it at the time. You know, I'm really glad that that happened at that time, because any other time, I perhaps, I wouldn't have been doing it while driving, but I would have been active, more than likely. And who knows how it could have played out then. But luckily, I was, a straight arrow at that point in time. Um, and they wrote down everything, that I was completely, lucid, aware, and they also had down that I seemed to be able to recall the incident and the crash, um, exactly as what the scene is describing to them. In other words, what I told them matches exactly up with what they are observing and investigating and looking at on the scene. Because you have to remember, our Highway Patrol Department investigates all wrecks, whether they have fatalities or not. They investigate all crashes and wrecks on the highway system.